Peace, my bad. Welcome to another episode of All Things Geekery, and today we shall talk about respectability politics. Thank you. Check it out.
Experiment Black Radio.
Radio, sucker never play me. Triple shade of black, then my bleach should never fade me. They say he crazy, New York raised them in the 80s. Killer catch administration, gangster renovation, born of isolation, Asian ill communication, Asian Marble, fight by acting, pestilential, microscopic soul, sonic remedy, clinic right in the street, operator in the dark, surgery.
Again, thank you for tuning in to All Things Geekery. Today's discussion will be about respectability politics. For those of you that know me, you know that respectability politics is something that really gets under my skin. It bothers me to no end, and it's probably something I rant about 50% of the time, even offline. Respectability politics is the idea that anyone can avoid racism, sexism, any type of marginalization or systemic marginalization by being a respectable member of society. Unfortunately, those standards of respect are usually set by the dominant culture, in our situation, white dominant culture, white patriarchal, male dominant culture. And oftentimes that dominant culture doesn't even follow those standards. So, for example, the best example I could give is Trayvon Martin. People were saying, well, if he wasn't wearing a hoodie, if he never smoked weed in high school, he probably never would have been in that situation where he would have gotten killed. Or probably one that we're more familiar with is usually in a rape case, they'll always ask the victim of rape, they'll ask her sexual history, you know, if she's promiscuous or not, or what she was wearing that evening. And oftentimes we hear people say, well, if you weren't out at 1 in the morning wearing that miniskirt, you probably wouldn't have been raped. And that's respectability politics in a nutshell. It's sexist, it's racist, it's homophobic, I can go on and on. But it's tremendously frustrating. But it's this idea that if we just act a particular way, if we pay our taxes and have all these degrees and are in a two-parent home and raised right and go to church, that racism or sexism or any type of marginalization can be avoided. And it's definitely not true. History has shown that it's definitely not true. You can have all those things and still be a victim of systemic racism or sexism. So why should we discuss respectability politics, right? The first thing is that too many of us deal with respectability politics. I've heard, mayors, I've even heard the President of the United States, President Obama, deal in respectability politics, particularly when it comes to the black community and the brown community as well. So a lot of people that have influence and power, whether they're a celebrity, whether they're a politician, whether they're policymakers, whether they're in a think tank, they always deal in respectability politics. And I think that's probably one of the most dangerous aspects of respectability politics, is that all these people who can actually make change, all these people that can actually affect policy, these people that can pass laws, these people that can actually influence other people into thinking about new ideas, they deal with it and they deal in it. And they'll tell people the reason why there's police brutality is because people in the black and brown community don't know how to act. They're always gang banging and having all kinds of kids in on welfare. Unfortunately, just because people do those things doesn't mean they should be treated as subhuman. And again, we're going to be judged as a human race on how we treat those that we may consider less fortunate than we are. And just because somebody lives in a neighborhood where those things happen doesn't mean that they should be brutalized and repressed by whether the police or any other government entity. But it's something that bothers me the most is that celebrities and people that have influence and politicians deal with it, because it's not a viable solution to these problems. The other dangerous thing about respectability politics is that it's a very subtle form of victim blaming. There are forms of victim blaming that are very overt, that are open, that you can say, hey, you're blaming the victim on that. But respectability politics does it in a very subtle way. And I hear people do that all the time. And when you blame the victim, what you're doing is you're removing all responsibility from the victimizer. You're removing all responsibility from the systemic racism or sexism, whatever form of systemic marginalization that we see. You're really taking away from that. You're really saying we can't blame it on them. We got to blame it on the victim. And that's one of the reasons why issues like police brutality are never fixed, because there's always something that's placed on the community instead of, say, for example, the police department or politicians. Like, when you do that, you just remove the onus from them, and the problems continue to occur. Same thing when it comes to sexism or any other form of marginalization, that if you continue to place the blame on the victim, it's going to be very hard for you to actually convict, say, rapists, convict serial rapists. It's going to be very difficult to do those kind of things, and that's why those things continue to happen. We continue to place the blame on the victim. So respectability politics is like a real subtle form of saying that, hey, you know, this is where the problem is. Finally, respectability politics is not a solution. I've been on many panel discussions. I've been to many public forums conducted by city governments and regional governments and state senators, and I can go on and on for police departments. And when they make these kind of assumptions, they make these, you know, they deal in respectability politics, they'll say, well, we'll police you better if your community just treated itself better, if you guys just stop shooting each other. It's not a solution, especially when the problem is coming from one particular groups or entities, like, for example, police brutality. It's the police that's brutalizing black and brown people in their community. It's not, we're not talking about interracial violence. We're talking about police brutality. So police departments have to fix that. And if we continue to say, oh no, the people over here have to fix it, they're not the ones that are getting, they're not the ones that are doing the beating. It's the police that are doing the beating and the murders and all those things. And they're not being held accountable for that. So it's not a viable solution. Telling a young woman how to dress is not going to keep her from getting raped. There have been women who dressed as nuns, who were nuns and got raped. And it doesn't work. And I don't mean to joke about it in that fashion because it's not funny. But respectability politics is not a solution. Once again, thank you for checking out All Things Geekery. And today we discussed respectability politics. I didn't cover everything. I was trying to put everything in a nutshell. I missed quite a few things. But feel free to add some stuff in the comments. If you disagree with me, put it in there. But definitely, I appreciate you guys checking me out. And until next time, thank you for tuning in to All Things Geekery. Peace.